Hello, church family. Welcome to today's Sunday school lesson. We are in session 5 entitled Power Revealed, and we're going to see today how God reveals his power in Exodus chapter 14, verses 19 through 31. What movie do you remember profoundly impressing you with its special effects? What were the effects, and what did you feel when seeing them? I saw Star Wars Return of the Jedi, episode 6. I was a child. I was little bitty when I saw it, but I remember wondering how they were able to show the second Death Star exploding, how they were able to do all of the space flight scenes with the Millennium Falcon and Luke, and also things like when Darth Vader tosses Emperor Palpatine into the core of the Death Star, causing it to explode. I was just mind boggled with all of these effects. Like, how did they do the lightning? How did they do these things? And so I felt like these were things that could happen in real life. That as a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, old I was when I first saw it, I wondered how they were able to make it look like a man had lightning coming from his fingertips. And how somebody could be shocked by that lightning, and you could see the X-ray through their skin, and also through Darth Vader's suit when he was being electrocuted. These are things I remember. I haven't seen Return of the Jedi in years, and I remember these things. I for a long time didn't understand how they could do things, and then I watched a documentary, George Lucas documentary, of how he and Steven Spielberg worked to make all of the miniatures for especially like the scenes in Revenge of the Empire Strikes Back, where they're on the ice planet Hoth and they're doing the miniatures of the walkers. And I'm sounding like a total nerd right now, talking about Star Wars and things like that, but those were the things that impressed me and astounded me for the first time. Another movie, Steven Spielberg movie, Jurassic Park. How did they make these dinosaurs seem so real and lifelike on the big screen? Even today, those special effects in the first Jurassic Park film really hold up, and they're still breathtaking pieces of cinematography. I love these movies. So anyway, we're looking at things that happen and that boggle the mind, and we're talking about special effects in this instance, but we're going to see how God rescued the Israelites and revealed his power to them by the parting of the Red Sea. So this is picking up just after the angel of death swept over Egypt and killed every firstborn son, and the Israelites were told that they could leave because of Pharaoh losing his son. And so they're leaving. They're leaving Egypt, and then behind them came the Egyptian forces on chariots and on foot, chasing the Israelites, going to kill everyone. God moves, the power of God, or the angel of God rather, who was in front of the Israelite group, moved between them and the Egyptians and created the pillar of cloud, and it became a pillar of fire later, or at least it did in the Prince of Egypt. Anyway, we're going to see how God parted the Red Sea and saved his people from the Egyptians and rescued them, and also revealed his power to them, splitting the waters, allowing them to walk across the sea on dry ground. So they're starting in verse 19. Then the angel of God, who was going in front of the Israelite forces, moved and went behind them. The pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and stood behind them. It came between the Egyptian and Israelite forces. There was cloud and darkness. It lit up the night. And neither group came near the other all night long, so they were separated. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back with a powerful east wind all that night and turned the sea into dry land, so the waters were divided. And the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall to them on their right and on their left. The Egyptians set out in pursuit all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen, and went into the sea after them. During the morning watch, the Lord looked down at the Egyptian forces from the pillar of fire and cloud, and threw the Egyptian forces into confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve and make them drive with difficulty. Let's get away from Israel, the Egyptian says, because the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water may come back on the Egyptians, or on their chariots and their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. So Moses was out of the sea already, and he stretched his hand out over the sea, and at daybreak the sea returned to its normal depth. While the Egyptians were trying to escape from it, the Lord threw them into the sea, and the Lord threw them into the sea. The water came back and covered the chariots and horsemen, plus the entire army of Pharaoh that had gone after them into the sea. Not even one of them survived. No Egyptian survived the sea. But the Israelites had walked through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall to them on their left and their right. That day the Lord saved Israel from the power of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great power of the Lord against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and believed in him and his servant Moses. So we see the power of God revealed. Our first section is called the escape. This is verses 19 through 22. So then the angel of God, who was going in front of the Israelite forces, moved and went behind them. So they were being led out of Egypt by a pillar of cloud during the day that would then turn to a pillar of fire at night. This pillar and the angel are the same thing. They are one and the same. And this is a manifestation of God's presence with Israel. But it went from in front of them, leading them, to behind them, protecting them from the Egyptian army that was advancing toward them. This is about 1 million people, or maybe over 1 million people walking. That takes a long time. That's a long train of people to wait in line behind. If you've ever hated waiting in line, you would have hated being in that line, leaving Egypt, except for the celebration that you're finally free. And then you hear chariots and you hear yelling from, several guys back, and you go, what's going on? And you turn and you look, you can't see anything but Israelites behind you. But at the very top of the hill, you see panic, and you see the cloud that has been in front of you and above you this whole time now swiftly moves to the rear and becomes a pillar of a wall of cloud and a wall of fire at night, protecting you from the chaos that you heard back behind. I can't imagine the panic and the and I don't think I've ever been in a crowd of 1 million people before, not knowingly. And I can't imagine trying to figure out what's going on when you hear everything around you. Everything is loud. Everything is noisy. You're all moving. You've got wagon wheels that are breaking that you're having to fix. And you've got sheep, and you've got cows, and you've got kids, and you've got old folks. And then you see the cloud move. What's going on? This thing that was leading us is now behind us. And so it went behind them. This is God's leadership that includes protection. This is the shepherd, the good shepherd, protecting his flock. Israel needed both. It needed good leadership. It also needed perfect protection. And that's what God was doing. The pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and stood behind them. It came between the Egyptian and the Israelite forces. There was cloud and darkness. It lit up the night. It became the pillar of fire, and neither group came near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back with a powerful east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. So if you've watched the movie or the musical, The Prince of Egypt, it makes it seem like the waters parted right then, but it actually took all night for this to happen. And the Israelites, it does happen immediately, but it happened all night long. This took place over the course of a night. This is 1 million people walking. It's going to take several hours. And so God held the walls up on either side, verse 22, with the waters like a wall to the left and to their right, or their right and to their left. So God parts the sea, and Israel begins to march across it. The Hebrew word indicates a large wall, like what that would surround a city, so several hundred feet high. The sea not only applies to deep water, sorry, the word sea in the original language does not apply to shallow marshes. It couldn't be the Sea of Reeds that's been talked about, which was a shallow lake. This is the Red Sea, the deep Red Sea. We can actually very quickly look up how deep the Red Sea is. How deep is the Red Sea? The Red Sea gets to a depth of 9,974 feet. And there was an eastern wind that blew across it. It runs, the sea runs north to south. There was an eastern wind that blew across it, parting it north and south, and they walked across it, supposedly, possibly, going across a depth of 9,974 feet. That is almost as tall, or that is taller than El Capitan, which is the only mountain in Texas, which is, Peak in Texas. El Capitan, which is 8,085 feet above sea level. So this is a greater elevation change than if you were to climb the only mountain in Texas. This is a big deal. This is a big, huge sea. This is really expressing the power of God. So as the Egyptian god army, what do you imagine what do you imagine the Egyptians thought as they saw the pillar of fire that was once in front of you and in front of the Israelites? What would you think you would think if it came and separated you from your prey, from the Israelites? What do you imagine they thought? They were probably in fear, but they were so angry and incensed and upset and enraged by what had just taken place in Egypt. They acknowledged the power of God, but they were still going to fight and chase his people. But God made a way when there seemed to be no way. Think about a time that you've seen that. Think about a time where God made a way for you or a loved one when there seemed to be no way, whether it be out of an abusive relationship or out of poverty or whatever it might be. Think of that. Think of how God provided that for you or for them. Then we see the defeat. This is verses 23 through 25. So the Egyptians set out in pursuit. The column of fire, the pillar of fire left and was let them go through. And they set out in pursuit. And this is all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, his horsemen, and went into the sea after them. This is the whole kit and caboodle, the cavalry, everything was going. During the morning watch, the Lord looked down at the Egyptian forces from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw the Egyptian forces into confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve and made them drive with difficulty. Let's get away from Israel, the Egyptians said, because the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water may come back on the Egyptians, on their chariots and their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea returned to its normal depth. While the Egyptians were trying to escape from it, the Lord threw them into the sea. The water came back and covered the chariots and horsemen, plus the entire army of Pharaoh that had gone after them into the sea. Not even one of them survived. So how does it influence our faith to know that God is always in control? It might have been terrifying for the Israelites. They're going across the sea. They're getting across. The last kid, probably the slowest person in line, the one that was talking to everyone else. They're the last one to climb the rocks to get to the shore. And just, not 100 yards away, here comes the army of the Egyptians. Where did the pillar of fire go that was separating us? God had taken that separation away, but he had a plan. He was going to use the sea to conquer Egypt's army. And that's what he does. He was always in control, even when it seemed like he had offered up his people as a sacrifice to Egypt. It looked like he was going to keep the sea parted for Egypt to get across and to defeat Israel. But that's not what happened. We read that God caused the sea to swallow them up. And not even one of them survived. No Egyptian escaped the sea once it returned to its normal depth. This further affirms that Israel did not cross at a shallow point. This was not something that the Egyptians could have walked across, they would have had to swim, and with the crashing of waves, and if it was 9,000 feet tall, if the walls of water were 9,000 feet tall, the weight of the water itself would have killed most of these Egyptians. It would have torn their chariots apart. It would have shattered the wheels of the chariots and shattered their armor, killed the horses, everything. Nothing would have survived that. It would have been the largest tsunami to ever have taken place. A normal tsunami, the wave gets about 100 feet tall. That's a big one. That's a big wave. I want to say that the wave that hit Indonesia in 2004. I'll just look it up. I have it right here. Indonesian tsunami 2004. Wave height. It triggered a tsunami with waves reaching 30 meters in height. That's about 100 feet. That killed 220,000 people in Indonesia in 2004. This is, if it was at the deepest point of the Red Sea, it may not have been, but if it were, that's a 9,000 foot wave. It would have completely destroyed Egypt's army, and it would have displayed God's power. And then verses 29 through 31, but the Israelites had walked through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall on them to them on their right and their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the power of the Egyptians, and Israel saw Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and believed in him and in his servant Moses. So in what ways has your faith been strengthened as a result of seeing God's power? Well, if God shows his power to us and it's undeniable, obviously that would strengthen our power. Think of a time that you've seen God's power revealed to you. Think of a time where God has proven himself to you beyond a shadow of a doubt. And what did that do for your faith? Why is praise the natural response when we have seen God work in a meaningful way? Well, here, verse 31, they feared the Lord and they believed in him and they praised him. And actually, I believe that's where Israel sang a song called Miriam's Song. And that was in Exodus 15. Yep, this is 14. We go back a chapter to make sure that this is the end of 14. Yes, it is. So if we go to chapter 15, Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both the horse and the driver he has hurled into the sea. And they begin to sing the song that goes on for 17 verses in chapter 15, praising God for what he has done in the rescue of Egypt. And so praise is the natural response, because what else can we do? We can be afraid, but we can also be in awe. And that is what Israel did. They were in awe of the Lord, and they were grateful for what he had done for them. And so when we see the mighty power of God through Christmas this past week, when we see the mighty power of God in our own lives because of his son Jesus, our natural response ought to be worship and praise of him who can do all things. I hope this is encouraging for you to trust in the power of the Lord, and that challenge to you, and I extend that challenge to you to see God working in mighty ways in your own lives. Thank you so much for worshiping, or for being with me today. I look forward to worshiping with you very soon. Bye-bye.